Thank you so very much, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you all today. My name is Christine Harada, and I'm the Executive Director of the Permitting Council. I'm especially excited to be here today because, of course, I think many of you may have heard today's a big news day for us, whereby President Biden established two new national monuments, Aviquame down in Nevada, and the Kastner Range in Texas, both of which I understand are very culturally significant sites for many tribal nations. And so we are super excited about that, and demonstrating that we can indeed build out our infrastructure while making sure that we are protecting the environment and protecting our cultural heritage all at the same time. It's simple, but it's not easy, and it's totally doable. The last few years have taught us a lot of things, and I know that we've heard one of the previous speakers talk about their experiences with respect to the importance of broadband access for every American, and how high-speed internet is no longer just a nice-to-have thing. It is very much a utility, just like electricity and running water, etc. And it's absolutely essential for Americans to be able to do their jobs, participate equally in school learning, and to stay connected. And that said, though, more than 30 million Americans live in areas where there's absolutely no broadband infrastructure that supplies minimally acceptable speeds, especially in rural communities. And by one definition, over 30% of the population on tribal lands do not have access to broadband infrastructure that provides minimally adequate speeds. And that's exactly why the president has an Internet for All initiative to ensure that everyone in the United States has access. And that is where the Permitting Council and the work that we do here come into play. With the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in 2021, and the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022. My office has been armed with a lot of tools and funding to get broadband infrastructure projects through the permitting process in the most effective, efficient, and transparent way possible. And to help make this goal a reality, as part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, President Biden secured a historic $65 billion investment to expand internet access, including significant investments in tribal communities. And I think many of you perhaps have heard also this morning, as well as last week, the $66 million that were made available for affordable community outreach programs. That is funding that has been set aside specifically for households on tribal lands. And this is work that actually is already starting to make a difference in tribal communities. In just the last few weeks, my office has brought on board into our portfolio one of the first tribal broadband projects. If permitted, the Santa Fe Indian School broadband project will provide high-speed internet access to communities and students throughout the rural and tribal areas of New Mexico. It's a 343-mile-long project in the state of New Mexico. And again, we're super excited about that. And this is just the beginning for broadband projects, getting access to the benefits of our program's coverage. And I'm here today to tell you a little bit about why you may want to consider the FAST-41 program itself as you plan your broadband endeavors. So starting at the very beginning, for those of you who may not know much about our agency, we were stood up in the 2015 timeframe with the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, or FAST Act, under Title 21, hence FAST-41. Classic government acronym ease, right? FAST-41 says absolutely nothing about what we do, who we are, etc., but that is where the acronym stems from. But fundamentally, what we do is to help address a lot of the common complaints of the federal permitting process that you see up here on the slides. Federal permitting has historically suffered from a lot of inefficiencies. The folks who are applying for permits, of course, have also continued to have suffered from the lack of predictability, lack of transparency. You don't know where nothing is. People are playing hot potato with the decision for your particular permit. What do you mean the person went out on maternity leave? You could have seen that coming. Who's got my application now? And who's going to be working on it and helping to push that forward? So everything from the stickier policy questions to some of the more pragmatic resource allocation issues. Those are precisely the kinds of things that my agency plays a role in ensuring that we are corralling all of the resources together throughout the federal enterprise to ensure that we're delivering on permits. So the main pillars of the FAST-41 program itself are these four buckets here that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. We seek to deliver the permitting predictability, So one of our publications, our seminal publications, the dashboard, I'll show you a screenshot of that later on, but this way you have some predictability on who's on first, what's on second, where are things at with respect to my permitting application, efficient issue resolution. Because of the membership of the Permitting Council itself, we are able to help drive a lot of the stickier questions and bring them to resolution with senior leadership. Transparency and accountability is a big element of us for our particular program. We help to ensure that there's transparency across the entirety of the federal government enterprise, as well as, for those state governments who opt into the process as well. And certainly last but not least, the federal agency collaboration and coordination. I anticipate that many of you in this room who have had experience in working with multiple federal agencies have found it frustrating because, again, you don't know who's on first, what's on second, what the status is. Why can't you guys just collaborate and coordinate more on your own? And that's precisely the role that my office plays, is ensuring that we are, again, corralling all of those resources together and figuring out the right place and right time. The Permitting Council is made up of the 13 federal permitting agencies whose seals you see here on rows 2 through 3, as well as 3 additional members, that being the chair of the Office of Management and Budget and the chair of the Council on Environmental Quality from the White House. And the council itself is convened by myself, who serves as the executive director. We're a relatively unique federal entity in that there are 16 members of this permitting council. So another analogy, we're different, but a similar kind of analogy might be like FERC, for example, where they have 5 different commissioners, there's an office of support, etc. And so we likewise are a council made of 16 members. And the members themselves are typically the deputy secretaries of these particular agencies. And so indeed, really the senior most policymakers and decision makers for each of these agencies. So the program was designed in statute to provide benefits for project developers, project sponsors, and applicants in these 6 main areas. So again, one around increasing predictability and understanding the status of where things are and how some of the issues may indeed be driven to resolution, enhancing coordination amongst the federal agencies across the different regions. Most importantly, I think, or most interestingly, I think for this group, is around resourcing. So we were fortunate enough to be provided with a very unique funding transfer authority, one that allows me to transfer funding not just to other federal government agencies, but also to tribal, state, and local governments as well. So if you guys are facing issues for your particular project where you see a state government or a tribal government saying, listen, I'd love to help you, I just don't have the people right now, like we're completely tapped out, there's a funding mechanism that's available with my office that can provide you with that kind of support, so that if there is indeed a capacity, a bandwidth issue, we can figure out a way to get the funding to you, whether it be through a 638 contract, a grant, or whatever the case might be, something that is accessible and easy to implement for you all. On the right-hand side, there's also one of the benefits that ends up coming out of the program is just really focused attention of agency leadership. And again, the Permitting Council itself is made up of the deputy secretaries of these departments. And so really, again, we have the attention of these particular senior policymakers, whether it be even just peripherally because they happen to see it on the dashboard, and or because we're doing a deeper dive into the particular projects and working through some of the stickier issues. And then I'll skip down to the last one around dispute resolution. There's also a dispute resolution clause in our statutory authority that allows us to play a role in negotiating or refereeing, if you will, some of the permitting timetable issues on the scheduling front. So one of the things I touched on this very briefly earlier, one of our seminal products is our dashboard, and this is a screen snap of our website. This is the top half of the site, and if you scroll down, that'll be the next page. But here you can see, for example, this is a real-life project called New England Wind off the coast of New England. It's an offshore wind project. It's worth, I think, about $2 billion, if I'm not mistaken. But here you can see who are all the agencies that are actually going to be involved in the particular permitting process. And it's absolutely identified. You know exactly where in the process it is overall. on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see who are the specific belly buttons that I can actually go and call or send an email to if I have questions or comments or would like to provide some input or ensure that you're being appropriately consulted on, etc. And if you scroll down on the screen, this is what you will see. It's the permitting timetable. I like to call it the master Gantt chart because now, probably for the first time, you will see all of the federal environmental reviews and permits that are required for this project, and the sequence and the dates by which they're anticipated to start and end. If you there are hyperlinks on this particular chart, and so if you see on the left-hand side what I would call the y-axis, there is listed the names of all the different environmental reviews, and so if you click on that, you'll find additional information there about some of the specifics with respect to the analyses. So, for example, whether it be the Endangered Species Consultation that's required as part of the NEPA process or the Marine Mammal Protection Act, Section 10 Rivers and Harbors Act, Clean Water Act, etc., you can see the status of all of the particular actions that are required for permitting this particular project. What's also super neat about the program itself is that it provides an opportunity for project sponsors as well as tribes. Tribes can sponsor projects. Of course, tribes are also consulted as part of the overall permitting process. But regardless, the bottom line point here is that there is a seat at the decision-making table for you all. It is statute, and the program is designed very deliberately to ensure that that voice is proactively sought out and adequately listened to. There's a lot of rules in the statute about how we manage the permitting timetable. And fundamentally really what it really boils down to is ensuring that there's good project and program management and coordination across the federal government, right? And so we recognize things happen. If you're in the Southeast, for example, during hurricane season, stuff's going to get backed up, etc. Inevitably, sometimes, schedules can and do get delayed or pushed out to the right. In those situations, what the statute provides for us to do is to ensure that we are all in lockstep in coordination. If there are delays, we know exactly why and for how long and in what way. How is that going to impact the rest of the sequencing for all of my particular projects? And there are also rules about it, as you see here on the bottom of the page, around various approvals that may be required by components within the White House for like extenuating delays, for example. And so it tries to keep federal agencies accountable for actually delivering on or about the time frame that we said we would deliver it on. So let's say, for example, if you have a particular project, for many of you here for broadband, if you're interested in participating in the program, how might you be able to do that? That process is summarized here on this particular page, and it's a fairly quick and tight time frame. And these dates and numbers, by the way, are articulated in the statute. And so these are statutory deadlines that we must meet, and we have been successfully able to meet them thus far. So firstly, let's say under square one, you decide, hey, you know what, this sounds like a really cool program. I think I'd like to sign up for it. I'm going to submit an application. Within 14 days, 14 calendar days, the federal government must make a determination on whether your project is or is not eligible for coverage. We'll talk about the qualifications here in a little bit. But then, within 60 days, if you will, going over from steps number 2 to 4, once your project has been accepted, the federal government has 60 days, 60 calendar days, to develop that master Gantt chart. And frequently, that can be a really heavy lift for a lot of federal agencies because sometimes there's a lot of unknowns. And so they're trying to figure out, okay, great. So we know, generally speaking, these are the steps that we need to take. What kind of big issues do we think that we're going to have to deal with? What kinds of species issues are there that we're going to have to make sure that we're incorporating, etc. But bottom line, within those 60 days, we need to publish the permitting timetable, that Gantt chart that I was showing you earlier. And then, of course, we need to go on, as I mentioned before, about managing the overall permitting timetable and ensuring project delivery and execution. There's also a whole bunch of other hooks to ensure accountability. not just within the executive branch, but also are required to submit compliance reports to Congress on a quarterly basis. And so the degree to which agencies are or are not complying with the requirements is something that we report out on. It is also, by the way, a remarkably powerful tool to get agencies to comply. I touched on this earlier about our unique statutory authority, and I do think that it's worthwhile spending a little bit more time on this. I describe ourselves as a bit of a unicorn. Again, we're different because we're a council of 16 members and we have this funding authority. So I have in my statute something called the Environmental Review Improvement Fund, and that's where a lot of the funding that's come through from Congress gets deposited into. And from that fund, I'm able to transfer funding out to federal, tribal, state, and local government agencies in order to help provide for more timely and efficient environmental reviews and authorizations. Some examples in the past that where we've used this for, I've transferred funding to NOAA, for example, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, as they are doing their studies in support of the offshore wind portfolio. They were just completely backlogged. There were 2.5 people that were working on the entirety of the offshore wind portfolio, of which I think there were like 15 projects. And that's a lot of endangered species, analyses that they had to do for all these different types of projects. And so we help provide funding to help bolster the support for contractors to be able to help with some of the analyses. We've also provided funding to agencies like the Army Corps of Engineers or the Department of Interior to ensure that their project management systems are actually getting implemented and getting tracked and put in place, et cetera, as they seek to ensure that we're delivering on these plans. With respect to how much funding do we have, we were fortunate in the Inflation Reduction Act to have received $350 million to be available over 9 years. And so we're currently very much actively in the process of developing the what I call the investment plan or the spend plan for the $350 million. We set aside $5 million of that in late November, early December of last year, specifically to assist tribes with their consultation efforts. It is absolutely a seed investment, largely because we are standing up this brand new mechanism and a brand new program. And so with that respect, we did a number of consultations during the month of February to solicit input on how tribes might be interested to be able to help best access that funding and what they would need to use that funding for. So the bottom line here is there's funding available. If you participate in the program, you can be eligible for the funding. So please come talk to us. When I first came on board, there's a good amount of myths out there about FAST-41, the who we are, the what we do, et cetera, because again, we're a bit different. And one of the things that I think inadvertently hampers us is the name, FAST. Yes, we certainly help expedite reviews by ensuring streamlining and coordination. But there's a number of things that we do not do fast in the name of, getting things out. We don't push out poor quality decisions. We do not cut corners. We don't dictate anything. We don't prescribe any deadlines. We certainly absolutely, defer to the agencies and the underlying organic statutes that they're required to comply with, whether it be Endangered Species Act, Marine Mammal Protection Act, et cetera. Nor do we do anything with respect to wading into the substantive aspects of a decision-making process. We are not the biologist experts to weigh in on, the impacts on the North American right whale in the Northeast with the offshore wind permits, et cetera. We certainly absolutely defer to the marine biologists and those experts there. That said, where we do weigh in on is with respect to the timetable. So, hey, I get that it's a sticky question. When are you guys going to be able to actually bring this to a resolution? Do you need my help in elevating this to somebody much more senior because it is absolutely, their call to be able to do that? Those are the kinds of ways that we help projects and project sponsors by pushing a lot of things behind the scenes. One of the other things that we do is we serve as a Center for Permitting Excellence, largely ensuring that we're capturing all of the better and best practices across the federal government. Like many entities that are just as massive as the federal government, there are pockets of excellence and there's really good things happening in all these different places across the United States. Many of them just not as super consistent, and so we try to make that as consistent and mainstream within the overall permitting process as much as possible. There's a couple of products that we do publish every year, namely the best practices recommendations. That's something that we publish most recently with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's a specific best practice category called out for tribal engagement, and so those are areas in which we just did a number of consultations again earlier this year and late last year to help inform the best practices around that. We also, at the council, provide a lot of training to our federal agency employees in the permitting space, specifically around how do we do tribal consultations. And there, we solicit the help of folks like the Udall Foundation to ensure that we're, incorporating a lot of the lessons learned through the decades. As for what projects can be eligible to participate in the program, my half joke is everything but roads and bridges and the Army Corps WRDA projects, but we have these 18 sectors that you see here in tiny font, admittedly on the screen: renewable energy production, conventional energy production, electricity transmission lines, manufacturing, carbon capture. We had 6 new sectors added during the Inflation Reduction Act, specifically around ensuring high performance computing, quantum information computing, etc. Pipelines as well. Currently, our portfolio consists of 30 projects, the vast majority of which is renewable energy production. We have 3 large transmission lines, 1 very large water resource project, an ecosystem restoration project down in the southeast. Recognizing, again, this is an eye chart, and these slides have been posted to the website, and they should be available for you all. But these are the types of projects, that criteria that we will be looking at as we seek to evaluate your all's application and discussions for eligibility of coverage. And in case you are interested to follow on with either us, with myself or my team who's here, Poke Queen and Craig can raise your hands in the back. My team is right there. Super happy to answer any questions. If not, if you don't get us today or tomorrow, fast.41@fipsi.gov is our email address. We're absolutely happy to play a consulting role. And so come talk to us and see if your project might be eligible and if there are ways that we can help you. Again, just as Danae was saying, if we can't help you, well, we can figure out who can help you, and so we can help serve in that connecting role. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will turn it back over to you.